All right, good morning. Well, good afternoon, I should say. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I just wanted to provide a little bit of commentary over the news this morning that, thank God, there is going to be a U-turn on the 45p tax cut by the government. Now, how did we get here? I mean, for all of last week, having all of that commentary around the fact that it was a terrible idea to give that tax cut to the highest earners in the country, and obviously from a political point of view, Tories being in a very difficult position. I think it's great that there is a U-turn on this right now. But it's funny, really, and the commentary that I want to give on here is specifically around whether or not there will be two things. Well, a few things actually. First and foremost, will the pound rally? We'll have a look at that in a moment because that was the fear, right? Well, last week, what we saw was the pound basically tank in value, which is inflationary because we import things, we're buying things in dollars, like a lot of things are being bought in dollars. The value of the pound is falling, things become more expensive. That then adds to the inflation problem, which means that you're then going to see higher interest rates. I've covered some of this in previous videos. And now, because they were doubling down, and this is one actually that I will share with you, which this is an article from September the 29th. So only literally a few days ago last week, the government doubling down, saying that it was the right thing to do, and now that we've got this U-turn today, there was a fear prior to that, and I speak about this actually on the podcast this week, that if they did not U-turn, there was possibly going to be spending cuts, which when you think about everything that's happened with COVID, furlough, cost of living crisis thus far, further spending cuts within the government will be extremely painful, particularly when you think about this 45p tax cut that they were looking to implement. So, generally speaking, is this good news? I would love to hear from you guys on this. Are you pleased that they're no longer going ahead with this? Because the argument when they were doubling down in this article here was that, well, it's only $2 billion in the 40 odd billion pound plan that they essentially had, but it went down horribly. And my argument was, why didn't you just increase the personal allowance for people so that the lower end of the tax bracket gets the help that they essentially need, particularly with the cost of living crisis? And it's interesting because within this article right here, we also saw last week the IMF also criticized the government, saying you're looking to borrow all of this money and you're adding a tax cut to the highest earners, essentially reducing your receipts. So it's good that they've actually decided to U-turn. But in my opinion, what do you think? I do want to maybe just share the clip of Liz Truss actually announcing that she was going to back down on this 45% cut. I believe this was yesterday, literally just over the weekend. I'm just going to play the clip if I can just find it right here, just for context, so we can see what was actually said. Let's go back to this view right here, and we're just going to play this clip.
Are you absolutely committed to abolishing the 45 pence tax rate for the wealthiest people in the country?
Yes. And it is part, Laura, it is part of an overall package of making our tax system simpler and lower.
Can I ask you, Prime Minister, did you discuss scrapping the top rate with your whole cabinet?
No.
Let me know if you can actually hear that,
didn't.
guys,
It was a
because
decision
in my
that,
headphones I can't hear
the
this. That might
Chancellor
just be a
made.
technical thing for me.
I did want to answer your question, Laura, that you asked me about, the
direct impact of the decisions
issues
you
we've
made.
seen this week. So I'm afraid there is an issue that interest rates are going up around the world, and we do have to face that, and we do have to do that. But I do want to say to people, I understand their worries about what has happened this week, and I do stand by the package we announced, and I stand by the fact that we announced it quickly because we had to act. But I do accept we should have laid the ground better. I do accept that.
You accept you should have laid the ground better.
I have learnt from that. I have learnt from that, and I will make sure that in future we do a better job of laying the ground.
Do you think, let me know what you guys think in the comments or even in the chat right here. Do you think that they've actually learned from this? Or do you think it's one of the situations where the pressure has been so huge that they've had no choice but to backtrack on this? Because to go from doubling down, saying it's the right thing to do, to all of a sudden turn around and be like, okay, look, we're not going to implement this anymore. What's happened? I think there's a lot of arguments around the fact that this is very much a political move, and they're thinking about this in terms of the next general election, which I don't think they're going to have any chance in winning. But do you really think that they've actually learned and they've actually listened, or do you think that they've actually just bowed to the pressure of it all? The biggest thing that concerns me and did concern me through all that admission was her saying that it was never really discussed properly within the cabinet. For such a big decision that would impact so many people and have such a profound impact on our economy, I find it really hard to believe that you would go with a mini budget and it wouldn't be tabled, discussed, debated with the cabinet. I mean, I've worked in very big Fortune 100 companies, and it's very, very rare that you would have someone take a unilateral decision that would affect the entire company. So why is that the case with the government? I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm very, very skeptical, very, very dubious on that point specifically. But now that they've U-turned, let's have a look at what's actually going on with the pound, because the pound today has actually rallied. The pound is up to $1, £1 and 12 pence to the dollar at this point in time. See, this is the tricky thing with the dollar, because the Bank of England stepped in last week to buy government gilt to prop up the price of the pound. At the moment, it's hard to tell whether this is going to have a material impact on the dollar. We won't find out until the purchasing scheme from the Bank of England kind of runs out next week, end of this week, beginning of next week. That's when we'll know. In terms of the gilt markets, I couldn't find anything on the gilt markets this morning. I don't think it's really moved that much. And again, it's because the Bank of England is still buying government gilts at this point in time. So they've put a floor in place specifically for that. So time will tell whether this is going to have a tangible benefit or not. I would still be interested to see whether or not there will likely be spending cuts. I don't think that there would be a need for spending cuts now that they backtrack on this. But I'd also be very, very interested to see what the forecast and the language, the sentiment is going to be around interest rates now that this has been taken off the table. But I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this something that actually you think they're just being politicians? They found out that it wasn't popular in the first place, and so now they've got their tail between their legs, trying to reposition to do something else to win back public confidence. There's a lot of stuff going on around at the moment that this has dented the confidence in the government, and I think it has. I mean, to not table this with the cabinet and debate this, I think is just absolutely shocking. I mean, you don't run a company like that, let alone a country. But what do you guys think? Let me know. There are a few comments here in the chat. Let me just try and get to a couple of these and see what you guys are saying. Maggie saying lots of lives this week. I will try to do as many as I can. I'm out from literally tonight for a couple of days, so just tracking. It's an interesting period of time, really, and I'm very, very aware that some of this commentary has a bit of a political stance to it. I'm trying to stay neutral, but where you've got monetary policy and fiscal matters that relate to money, and all of this is being caused by a political party, it's hard to separate those two things. Edna's on here. Good morning. Embarrassing, frankly. That's what Sinead is saying. And I think look, from an international point of view, I think we're a bit of a laughing stock right now, if I'm honest. It's very, very embarrassing indeed. It feels like they're asleep at the wheel. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just being reactive. I mean, the government is supposed to be decisive. The government is supposed to, they've got the numbers around the economy and the books and what we've got, what we don't have, our debt, all of that kind of stuff. They should be the ones making informed decisions, right? With, right, we think this is going to work. This is the best thing for the country. Having consulted, having actually got the Office of Budget Responsibility to actually run a report to see if it all stacks up. They didn't do any of that. I mean, it's really, really embarrassing from an international point of view. Are they going to be able to save face, though? If I'm completely honest, I'm surprised that they've U-turned. I was fully expecting them to stick with their guns, and the next thing they would announce would be spending cuts. And I talk about that in the podcast today. I'm happy that they've U-turned, but at the same time, massive question mark over their credibility now. Massive question mark. Maggie's just saying here that it is not enough that they do that the wrong way around. The damage is already done. Yes, I would agree with that for sure. Walter would have still liked to have seen them increase the tax allowance like you suggested a week ago. That 1% change to the base rate is hardly anything for someone on average wage. Yes, I would completely agree with that. I would love to see what it would have looked like if it had been costed to increase the personal allowance from £12,500 all the way up to say 20 or 25,000. How much would that actually cost? Would it cost 2 billion? Possibly, but it would have helped a lot of people. And I think for a government that's struggling at this point in time with public confidence, if you wanted to really win people over, that would have been the measure that you could point to say, we care about the people. We care about the impact of the cost of living crisis on everyday people, on normal homes, on low income homes. That's how they could have won a lot of hearts and minds. Why didn't they do it? Maybe it doesn't stack up fiscally. I don't know. I would love to see a report on that. But like I said, I'm not an economist and I'm certainly not built to be the chancellor. But it would have been an interesting thing to see. Let's see what else we've got here. Yeah, someone saying here they're not going ahead with the proposed changes, but now they've shown their hand. Really, really good point there. I think they'll finesse their approach, but the ideology will remain the same going forward. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think they'll find another way to do something very, very similar with the aim of growth at the core. Because like I said, in the budget, I think there were some very, very good things in there. This bit has overshadowed. But I think the damage is already done, really, to be fair. But who knows? It's all going to be about positioning and messaging. And that's one of the things that they've not been able to do. I read a really interesting Twitter thread the other day, and it was from a guy who worked in the city for JP Morgan. And he goes, he used to work with a guy who was kind of like a guru, the be all, like the Ayatollah, kind of like the encyclopedia when it came to macroeconomics. And when he was just starting in this firm, he goes, he listened to this guy give a speech, an analysis on a situation that happened. And he went to go ask him a question, and it turned out that this guy who's supposed to know everything completely misconstrued and confused two separate fundamental principles, right? But the thing was, he was speaking to a room of people who knew their stuff. And even though it would have been obvious to the other people in the room who also knew their stuff that he had confused two fundamental principles, nobody challenged him because he said it with confidence, and the delivery was with confidence. And he went on to say in that thread that one of the things that Kwasi Kwarteng hasn't done and the government hasn't done is they've not delivered that message with confidence. And I think that's really what has come through loud and clear in what's happened over the past week or so. Kwasi Kwarteng is a very, very educated man, knows a lot about economics, but the communication has been just so poor. So they need to work on the communication, and I think they need to provide that confidence, right, that they know what they're doing and they're doing things in the best interest of the country, in opposed to just hiding away for a few days last week whilst the proverbial hit the fan. But anyway, look, this is where we are. I think this is very, very good news. What happens to the pound we'll see. We'll be tracking it through the week. What happens to interest rates? Again, we'll be tracking that over the next couple of weeks or so. But thank you so much for joining this morning. I appreciate you. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.